All right, tonight we've got new reporting from the Washington Post that appears to contradict or at least cast doubt on one of President Donald Trump's central defenses in the impeachment inquiry. You may remember that 1 week ago today, EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland testified to Congress that there was an explicit quid pro quo involving the announcement of investigations into Trump's political rivals in exchange for a coveted White House meeting. At that hearing, Sondland also testified that he spoke with the president by phone on September 9th, 2 days before the hold on military aid was lifted. This is important because of what Kyle just said, September 9th, 2 days before. The president took to the White House lawn to defend himself, using a set of talking points based on that specific call between Trump and Sondland. According to both Sondland and the president, when Sondland asked the president what he wanted from Ukraine on that September 9th call, Trump replied, quote, "I want nothing. I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo." Well, now tonight, new reporting by the Washington Post casts doubt on those claims. The Post reports that, quote, "no other witness testimony or documents have emerged that corroborate Sondland's description of a call that day, and that the White House has not located a record in its switchboard logs of a call between Trump and Sondland on September 9th, according to an administration official." You can see why every day, sometimes it feels like every hour, new reporting makes this story that much more intriguing. Joining us now, Ben Rhodes, Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama and the author of The World as It Is, a memoir of the Obama White House. Mr. Rhodes, thank you for joining us tonight. Let's first of all just get your reaction to this, the idea that Gordon Sondland's testimony in large part was predicated upon this phone call that apparently took place between him and Donald Trump, a phone call that feels like it might have been scripted, that it was so good in what it had to say if you were Gordon Sondland. What do you make of the fact that there's no record of this phone call?
Well, look, first of all, Ali, the whole fact picture around this phone call suggests that there was entirely a quid pro quo, that Trump was leveraging this assistance to try to get an announcement of these investigations. And then this reporting kind of suggests what also seemed apparent, which is that they knew that they were going to be caught. They knew there was scrutiny around this. And so this is like someone who knows that they're being caught, you know, calling someone and saying, "I am not committing a crime." You know, I mean, nobody says no quid pro quo. That's not like something you say in casual conversation here. So it seems very clear that this phone call is contradictory to the rest of the entire fact pattern and was motivated by their effort to get something on the record that could potentially obscure what they'd already been caught doing.
You were a Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama, and I think that it has been years, probably since Iran-Contra, that the National Security Advisor role has been so public and people have understood how it all goes on. The people who populate that office, in many cases the people we've heard testifying, they were not Democrats or Republicans. They are people who have been working in the security apparatus either for a long time inside government or outside. Give me your sense of their impact on the impeachment process so far.
Well, that's a great question, Ali, because the point that's critical for people to understand is the vast majority of the national security staff in the government is apolitical, or people who are civil servants who serve both Republicans and Democrats. Foreign service officers at the State Department, like people that we've heard from repeatedly, you know, Bill Taylor comes to mind. People in the uniformed military, like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who comes to mind. And then kind of nonpartisan experts like Fiona Hill. All of these people are there to serve the national interest. And that's generally the national security community. And you hear in those people's voices, you know, a commitment to the Constitution and to a sense of what are the national interests of the United States in Ukraine. And the national interests of the United States in Ukraine are to push back against Russian aggression, to help a country that is being besieged literally by a U.S. adversary. And what's so striking in this whole process is, separate and apart from all of those people, there was this distinct channel of people like Rudy Giuliani and Gordon Sondland. Rudy Giuliani, who's not even in the U.S. government. He's a personal attorney for President Trump. And Gordon Sondland, who's a donor, not even representing Ukraine. He's there to representative to the European Union. And so clearly Trump created a parallel channel that would carry out his efforts to politicize for his own personal and corrupt gain our foreign policy. And all the rest of the people were mystified and in many cases apparently horrified by this.
And we got some of this from some of this testimony, but the fact is there may be some people who think that's enough to impeach Donald Trump, that he was doing something for his personal enrichment. But national security experts are actually concerned that it's not actually the personal enrichment part is secondary to the fact that that money was congressionally approved for a national security reason. So doing something else that is of no consequence for personal enrichment or political enrichment is one thing, but this wasn't a thing to play with. The support for Ukraine is not sort of a fun charitable thing.
Yeah, this is not some trivial national security matter. This is one of the chief geopolitical hotspots in the world today, Ali. Ukraine literally depends upon this assistance as a lifeline as it is fighting an ongoing war with Russia that is occupying part of its territory that has killed thousands of people, right? So this is a very pressing national security matter that was being made secondary by Donald Trump to his own personal interests. The thing that worries me, Ali, is if Donald Trump is not held accountable for this, the message that will be sent, presumably by the Republican Party, is that we're okay with this. We're okay with presidents essentially putting the personal interest over the national interest, even in matters of extreme national security importance. And think about how that could be applied going forward. What is the message going forward to other countries around the world and to people in our own national security community if we're basically going to say as a country, it doesn't matter if a president prioritizes the investigation of his own political opponents over the national interest. And I think that's why you saw such uniformity of opinion in all those fact witnesses today.
Can you remember when you were Deputy National Security Advisor, whether there were congressional Republicans who were saying, we're okay with this, we'd be okay with President Obama doing something like this? Those were simpler times, Ben. Good to see you, my friend.
Well, not only did they try to make President Obama out to be, someone who was an out-of-control executive when he absolutely wasn't, but importantly, they were huge supporters of Ukraine. And in fact,
of course,
we were constantly attacked by Republicans for not providing more aid to Ukraine.
Right.
And what's been really sad to watch is them flip on matters related to Russia and Ukraine to suddenly having no problem with treating this ally like a second-class citizen, a country that is only a forum for their own personal political efforts to obstruct or attack Democrats.
Ben, we're always grateful for your analysis. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Good to be with you.
Ben Rhodes, Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama. All right, just ahead, new details about Rudy Giuliani's dealings in Ukraine. We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.